you pray with me? Holy and gracious God, we seek your blessing and your Spirit now. Move in this space that the words might reflect your words. The message might reflect your message. That all of us might hear you speaking this day. We pray in your Son's name. Amen. The musical Big Fish, based upon the 2003 movie, which is itself based upon an early 90s novel, is about stories. It tells the tale of Edward Bloom, who liked to tell fish stories, and his fish stories make up a good portion of the show. And just to hammer home how much it is about fish stories, the show bookends itself by having two sets of fathers and sons literally catching fish that were this big, just in case we missed the illusion. But most of the fish stories in the show are not about actual fish, but about Edward Bloom. Edward Bloom was a big fish in a small pond in rural Alabama and leaves town to make his life. Along the way, he makes many friends, is pretty successful as a traveling salesman, falls in love with Sandra Templeton, and has a son named Will. And that son is what gives the show and the story its grounding, because as the musical begins, Will is no longer a child, but is grown up and getting married and has a son of his own on the way. And in the midst of it, wants to know who his dad truly was. Because Edward, you see, liked to tell fish stories. He would tell Will about his life, but he would tell them in ways that were fantastic and amazing and perfect for the musical theater stage. He would tell about befriending a giant and traveling the world with him as his closest friend. He would tell about working for a circus and working for years to get a clue about who Sandra Templeton was, that he could go and propose to her and marry her, and not getting the final clue until he discovers that his boss, the circus master, is actually a werewolf. Will, as he approaches parenthood, wants to tell his son what's real, what's true, and strives throughout the show to find out what is real and true about his father. A quest that is given urgency when the second scene of the show reveals that Edward Bloom is dying of cancer and actually will not last more than a few months. The musical and the movie before it weaves these two parts of Edward Bloom's life, the present and his version of his life story, giant werewolf and all, in a beautiful tapestry that, let's be frank, the show focuses a lot more on the outrageous and amazing because it is a musical theater show, and who can resist a giant that sings? But it does so in a way that gives real credence to the idea of what is true matters. Now, other themes come up with the story, other portions and side plots pop up, one of which is the love of Sandra and Edward that is amazing and beautiful and leads to one of the songs that will make you cry. I wrote that if it was a Facebook post, it would require a trigger warning. And if you want to go get a good cry when you get home, go look up I Don't Need a Roof from Big Fish. As Sandra Templeton, the grown Sandra, sings to her husband about how much she's going to miss him. It's a tearjerker. It'll make you cry. But most of the show comes back again and again to storytelling and stories and the power they produce and the question of what is real and what is true, and why it matters. Just a caveat, just so you know. I joke with people that I didn't pick out any happy shows for the sermon series because so many characters die at the end of the shows we're preaching on these next several weeks. But I will tell you, The Big Fish is not a sad musical. You will not watch it and feel depressed the whole time. There's occasional gut punches. Edward Bloom is dying. But for the most part, it's a joyous show. And the joy comes down to those stories, and especially to what Will discovers about those stories. And that's this: that what is true and what is real and what is meaningful doesn't depend on what is factual. Edward Bloom was a man who had many friends, who was always ready to help someone in need, who strove his whole life to make people, and especially his family, his beloved son and wife, happy. And the stories that he tells, that we see enacted on stage, accurately show who he was and how he lived and how he strove to be. And those stories about who he was, are more important than the facts on the ground. Because the person of Edward Bloom matters more than the reality of what he lived. And Edward Bloom, well, he knew who he was. It's the way he told the stories he told, the way he told them. He knew who he was and told stories that reflected who he was and who he strove to be. And that's one of the messages that I think this musical has for us as the church. That we need to know our stories, to claim and know who we are, and be able to tell our stories about who we are. So, we're going to practice. I'm going to make you work. In just a few seconds, I'm going to invite you to turn to someone near you, and it can be groups of 3 or 4, but not huge groups, and tell a story of some way you have seen the church caring for others. Now, as I keep telling all the small groups, my questions are meant to be broad, so interpret this however you want. It could be this congregation, a different congregation you've been involved in, the wider church. Pick what works and makes sense for you. But tell a way that you have seen the church care for others. And then we'll come back to the sermon. Let go.
Caught me off guard on that one.
Or whatever's changing.
Didn't that start from this one years ago? Years ago.
But anyway, I think they reach out a lot because I'm new to the community. Probably, but I think they've got such a large crowd. Our congregation is actually the other year. But I know on the holidays, like Thanksgiving, when we would work on the store, they would prepare a meal, and everybody that was working at a holiday would take their holiday meal. And I just thought that was, I mean, it was a way of reaching out for that's all, only story I know. That was something they had. It was just call them up and see who's working and how many they deliver. Oh, well,
He takes meals to me.
No, but I mean, that's but we like that in the day,
talking about things that could be back in June when they had that major surgery. Yeah, I'd say I was there pretty weak right there. The church did bring serenity. And I was strong enough.
About 30 more seconds.
Yeah, but otherwise I was
Yeah, just take some time to think.
I'm going to draw us back in now. And I thank you for your sharing and for good conversation and jumping into that with a good feel in the room. I invite you to share those stories with me after church or during the week. Stop in the office. I'd love to hear where you see the church doing that kind of caring for one another. And why did I do this? The musical Big Fish reminds us of the importance of stories. Living our own story. It reminds us that living out our stories is important. And the gospel makes clear, I think, what our story as a church is meant to be. We're meant to be a church that cares for people, all people, from the least of these to those who are the greatest of these. We're meant to be a people who show God's love in what we do, and how we live in the world. And we're meant to be lights in the world. That's what the Gospel of Matthew reminds us of. We are lights in the world that reflect the light of the world that is Jesus. So that the world might see Him through us, might see God's light through us. Part of how we do that is by telling stories of how we already have. Not so we can pat ourselves on the back and say, how great are we? But instead, because stories can be inspiration. Stories can help us to imagine new ways. Stories can help us to see what we can do going in the future. And so we tell our stories to one another, not so we can shout how wonderful we are, but so those stories of what we've already done or already seen done might empower us to keep doing more stories, to leave even more to who we're called to be as the church. And that's how Edward Bloom lived. In Big Fish, Edward told his son at an early age that you should be the hero of your own story. In fact, he sang, he said, be the hero of your story once again. Be the hero of the story if you can. And in being the hero of his own story, Edward Bloom, while not said directly in this show, it's pretty implied, strove to be one who always sought to see the good in others, who strove to laugh, entertain, and love, to be one who loves his wife and son fiercely and wants to be there for his friends. Edward Bloom was there for his friends. During the show, it's implied he has a secret. A part of his story he's never told anyone. I won't tell you why he tells that secret, because you've got to watch the show and find out. It's pretty powerful and it's pretty amazing. But the secret is this. His hometown was in danger in rural Alabama. A new dam was being built, and basically the lake from the dam was going to be on top of his town. So the residents of the town chained themselves at City Hall, betting the government wouldn't build the dam, it was going to drown all these people. They probably wouldn't have right away. There are ways to take care of it. Edward Bloom came to town and said, hey, this is not the way. It's not going to work. Instead, let me help. He went to his friends, the giant, and the circus leader who happened to be a werewolf. And he got their help to buy land, provide resources to build houses, and rebuild the town outside of the flood zone. He lived up to his own advice. He became the hero of his own story and saved the day, saved the town. It was a light the world. Parents, we're called to do the same. We don't have to go and buy a town a whole new space, mind you. That's musical theater. We can be people who show love and care to others, who strive to be lights in the world in all that we do, who let that light show in how we treat others, how we react to the stranger. Let our lives reflect the light of God seen in Jesus, the grace of God seen at the cross, and the new life won for us at Easter. We can be people who let our lights shine, and that light can be and even should be our story. Then we can let that story inspire us and motivate us and move us to keep doing the same thing, to love others, to care for the least of these, to shine our lights in ways that bring glory to God, to shine our lights in ways that bring the kingdom a little bit closer. Because God loves us. God calls us to love the world, and we can love the world. We can let our lights shine. That's God's story for us, and that's our story. Thanks be to God. Amen. And now, we get to sing about stories. Let's sing.